The morning sky stretched endlessly above the snow-tipped mountains of Montana, clear and golden with the rising sun. Flight 237 from Seattle to Denver cut smoothly through the air, a silver streak against the pale blue horizon. Inside the cockpit, Captain Laura Hayes sat with perfect posture, her gloved hands resting lightly on the controls. Every movement of hers carried a quiet precision, the kind that comes only from decades of discipline and experience. Her co-pilot, Ethan Morales, barely 30, glanced over and smiled nervously. "Smooth air today, Captain. Looks like an easy one." Laura returned a faint smile. "That's what they always say before it isn't." He chuckled uncertainly, not sure if she was joking. She wasn't. Years of flying, both in the military and as a commercial pilot, had taught her that calm skies often hide storms. But for now, the cabin hummed in peace. The seatbelt light was off. Flight attendants laughed quietly as they prepared breakfast trays. Families chatted softly, and a toddler giggled somewhere in row 23. Laura glanced at the photo taped discreetly beside her flight instruments. A small picture of her and a group of uniformed Air Force pilots standing in front of a rescue chopper. It was old, edges frayed, but she kept it there as a reminder of what she once was, and what she never wanted to become again. The radio crackled faintly with chatter from other flights. She adjusted her headset. "Denver Center, this is Flight 237, maintaining altitude 35,000 feet, all systems normal." "Copy that, 237, came the calm response. "Winds are light, visibility excellent. You're clear to continue on course." Laura nodded to herself. It was routine, the kind of flight most pilots prayed for. Yet something deep inside her, that old instinct that had saved her life more times than she could count, told her not to relax. At 10:47 a.m., that instinct proved right. A faint vibration began to shake the cockpit. Ethan frowned. "Captain, do you feel that?" Laura's eyes flicked to the instrument panel. One engine temperature gauge was spiking. "Engine 2's running hot," she said, her voice level but alert. "Throttle back to 80%. Ethan complied instantly. The vibration worsened. A deep metallic bang tore through the air. The entire left side of the aircraft jolted violently. A blinding flash shot from the left wing as the engine exploded in a burst of fire and shrapnel. Oxygen masks dropped throughout the cabin. Alarms blared. The cockpit filled with acrid smoke. "Engine 2 flame out," Ethan shouted. Laura's hands flew over the controls. "Hydraulics? Failing. Stabilizers? Unresponsive." The plane began to roll left, dipping sharply toward the ground. Passengers screamed. Luggage tumbled from overhead compartments. A baby cried somewhere in the back. That sound cut through everything. "Focus," Laura barked. Her voice carried command, sharp, steady, absolute. She gripped the yoke and countered the roll manually, her arms straining. The controls felt heavy, sluggish. "I've got the aircraft," she said firmly. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead. "Altitude 26,000 and dropping." "Feathering engine 1, she said, killing power to stabilize drag. "Give me auxiliary power. We're switching to manual trim." Ethan followed orders, his fingers trembling as he flipped switches. The cockpit lights flickered. For a moment, it seemed like the plane might level. But then another warning light flared red. "Fuel leak." "Jesus Christ," Ethan whispered. "Not today," Laura muttered. She turned on the intercom. Her voice came through the cabin speakers, calm, even utterly composed. "This is your captain speaking. We are experiencing a technical malfunction and will be making an emergency descent. Please remain seated and secure your oxygen masks." In the cabin, Panic turned into stunned obedience. Her voice, so steady, was enough to make people believe they might survive. "Mayday, Mayday," she called into the radio. "This is Flight 237, experiencing dual-engine failure, descending through 24,000 feet, requesting emergency assistance." Static. She tried again. "Denver Center, this is Flight 237 declaring Mayday. Do you copy?" Nothing. Ethan's eyes went wide. "They're not hearing us." "Switch to backup frequency." He did. Still silence. Something wasn't right. It wasn't just equipment failure. It was complete communication blackout. Laura's pulse quickened, but her hands never stopped moving. She checked alternate frequencies, military bands, emergency beacons, all dead. It was as if they'd flown into an invisible cage. Then came the worst sound of all, the metallic shriek of the wind tearing at the fuselage. The plane had dropped below 15,000 feet. Lavra scanned the horizon, vast mountains, thick forests, no flat ground for miles. She had minutes to find a place to land, or they'd hit the ridge and scatter across the valley. Ethan's voice broke. "We're not going to make it, are we?" She glanced at him, her eyes hard, fierce. "We're not dying today, Morales." "Not while I'm flying." Her tone silenced him instantly. Laura tried the military emergency channel. She hadn't used it in years, not since she'd left the Air Force under circumstances no one dared mention. Her hand hovered over the switch. Doing this would expose something she'd buried long ago. But she had no choice. She flipped the switch and pressed the mic. "Mayday, Mayday. This is civilian aircraft, Flight 237, requesting immediate radar assistance. Call sign Valkyrie 6. For a moment, the only sound was the roar of air and fire. Then the radio hissed faintly and went completely silent. Laura frowned. "Did you hear that?" Ethan shook his head. "Hear what?" "I thought she started, then stopped. It didn't matter. She couldn't wait for help that wasn't coming. She scanned the terrain ahead. There. She pointed. Through the smoky haze, an old abandoned airstrip peered in the distance. A relic from the Cold War, cracked and overgrown, but long enough to hold a desperate landing. Ethan blinked. "That thing's been closed for decades." "Then it's about to reopen," she said. "Fuel's leaking fast, Captain. We won't make it. We'll make it." Her voice left no room for doubt. She'd been in worse. Gunfire over Kandahar, rotor failure over enemy lines. Compared to that, this was just another mission. She adjusted the trim, feeling the aircraft respond sluggishly. Every second mattered. Smoke burned her eyes, but she stayed focused. In the cabin, passengers clutched hands, prayed, cried. Some watched her through the cockpit window, their terror easing just a little when they saw her calm expression. Outside, far above, two small shapes appeared on radar, fast-moving, high-altitude. F-22 Raptors. But Laura didn't see them yet. As the crippled airliner descended toward the narrow strip of land, Lavra whispered to herself, "Come on, Valkyrie. One more flight." The plane dipped lower, skimming the treetops. The mountains loomed like stone giants on both sides. Alarms screamed in the cockpit, stall warnings, fuel alerts, hydraulic failure. Ethan shouted over the noise, "Brace for impact." Laura's jaw tightened. Her hands gripped the controls so tightly, her knuckles went white. "Not yet," she said. "We land when I say we land." And then, as if the universe paused for one last heartbeat, the radio crackled faintly again. A single ghostly voice on the other end, distorted but clear enough for her to hear one word. "Valkyrie?" Laura froze. The voice was male, familiar, distant, from another lifetime. Before she could respond, Static swallowed the sound completely. She blinked, refocused on the burning runway ahead. "Hang on," she whispered. "All of you." Flight 237 roared through the clouds, wounded but alive, and in that moment, so was she. The nightmare had just begun. The plane shuddered as it cut through a pocket of turbulence, the air howling against the broken fuselage. Inside the cockpit, flames danced along the cracked panel edges, and the smell of burning insulation filled the air. Captain Laura Hayes kept her jaw tight, her fingers white-knuckled on the yoke. "Fuel pressure's dropping fast," Ethan shouted, his voice trembling over the alarm chorus. "We've got maybe 15 minutes." Laura's eyes flicked between the failing instruments and the terrain outside the windshield. Below, the Montana wilderness stretched endlessly pine forests, ridges, rivers winding through desolate valleys. No roads, no towns. Nowhere to land except that abandoned strip, still miles ahead. "Keep it steady," she said, her voice low and measured. "I'm trying, but hydraulics are shot." "Then don't try." "Feel it." Ethan blinked at her. Her tone was calm, confident, like a teacher guiding a student through his first solo flight instead of a dying aircraft. He adjusted his grip, matching her rhythm. The plane steadied slightly. Laura exhaled slowly. The engine sputtered, coughed, then caught again. A reprieve. The cabin intercom buzzed. The chief flight attendant's voice came through, cracking with static and fear. "Captain, passengers are panicking. We've got smoke in the rear section." "What should I tell them?" "Tell them," Laura said, still watching the horizon, "that we're not going down. We're landing. And they're going home tonight." The attendant hesitated. "Yes, ma'am." When the line clicked off, Ethan glanced at her. "You really think we'll make it?" Laura didn't answer. Thinking was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. She reached for the radio again, switching to the last frequency she knew. "Mayday, Mayday. This is civilian aircraft Flight 237. Dual engine failure. Uncontrolled descent. Requesting immediate radar assistance. Call sign Valkyrie 6. The word left her mouth like a ghost escaping from a grave. For a heartbeat, the world went completely silent. Even the alarms seemed to fade. Static hissed faintly, but no voice came back. Then, faintly just a low electric buzz, followed by a clipped whisper. "Say again?" Laura's heart jolted. "This is Valkyrie 6, she repeated, louder this time. "Requesting emergency guidance. Coordinates unstable. Respond, please." No reply. Only a soft click, then dead air. She lowered the headset slowly, her pulse hammering in her throat. She hadn't used that call sign in years. Not since Afghanistan. Not since the night 6 of her crew never made it back. Ethan was staring at her. "Valkyrie 6? That's a military tag, isn't it?" Laura didn't look at him. "Old habit," she lied. "Keep monitoring for a TC." But she knew that wasn't true. Military call signs were encrypted, archived, and erased once decommissioned. Using one now was like shouting into a graveyard and hearing something whisper back. Outside, the sky grew darker, clouds gathering over the peaks. The F-22s, miles away and invisible to the naked eye, had already locked on to the crippled aircraft's radar signature. Inside NORAD command, alarms triggered quietly. "Unidentified civilian aircraft broadcasting restricted call sign," an operator said, frowning. "Valkyrie 6. The duty commander froze. "Repeat that?" "It's on an emergency frequency. Civilian registration, but the pilot just called herself Valkyrie 6. The commander's face turned pale. "Patch that through to command control now. And scramble intercept." Back in the cockpit, Laura was too focused to notice what she'd just set in motion. The seconds dragged into minutes. The fire in the left engine finally died out, but the damage was done. The plane was losing altitude faster than planned. We're down to 10,000 feet, Ethan said, scanning the gauges. Still no coms. Lavra adjusted the course slightly, keeping the nose aligned with the small clearing ahead. We'll glide as far as we can, she said. Once we hit 8,000, we start final descent. Ethan nodded, though his hands trembled. And if we miss? We won't. He swallowed. You really believe that? I have to. Her tone was quiet but sharp, the voice of a leader who knew that belief wasn't hope, it was discipline. The radio crackled again. This time, she heard it barely audible, but unmistakable. Valkyrie 6. Identify. Her breath caught. She pressed the transmit button. This is Valkyrie 6 civilian aircraft, Flight 237. Dual engine failure. We're descending near coordinates 46.6 north, 111.2 west. We require assistance. A pause. Then, through static. Negative. Remain off secure channel. You're not cleared for military frequency. What? She said. This is a mayday call. We need. But the voice cut off abruptly. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. Did they just hang up on you? She didn't answer. The chill creeping through her had nothing to do with altitude. Someone had heard her, but they weren't helping. Outside, through the thinning clouds, she caught a glimpse of sunlight flashing off something metallic. 2 small dots, distant but unmistakable, moving fast. Jets. Her stomach dropped. High above, the F-22 pilots were closing in. Their headsets buzzed with encrypted chatter. Control. Visual on target, said LT. Call. Ryan Pierce, his voice even. Civilian 737. Heavy smoke from port engine. Confirm call sign Valkyrie 6? Confirmed, the controller said. Do not engage? Repeat, do not engage. Pierce frowned. Sir, it's broadcasting a civilian transponder. There are hundreds of lives on board. Orders stand. His wingman, Captain Dana Cross, glanced at her radar screen. Why the silence, Command? If she's Valkyrie 6, shouldn't we? Negative, came the cold reply. That designation is classified. Maintain visual distance. No contact. Pierce muttered under his breath. She's flying a burning passenger jet, and they're telling us to stay quiet? Cross didn't answer. Her gaze stayed fixed on the crippled aircraft spiraling below them. In the cockpit of Flight 237, the radio remained dead. Laura's hand trembled slightly as she reached to turn it off. They're not coming, she said quietly. Ethan looked at her in confusion. Who? Anyone. The words hung heavy between them. For a moment, the only sounds were the alarms and the soft rush of air past the damaged fuselage. Then, suddenly, Lavra straightened in her seat. Check radar. Do you see anything above us? Ethan squinted at the display. 2 blips, maybe 20 miles out, high altitude. Looks military. She nodded slowly. Of course. Are they helping? Lavra gave a short, humorless laugh. If they were, we'd know. The truth stung, but she didn't have time to dwell on it. She focused on the approach path, eyes narrowing. The airstrip was too close. They'd have one shot at a glide path before losing lift entirely. Passengers need to brace, she said. Ethan nodded and grabbed the intercom. His voice wavered but held together. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your first officer speaking. We're preparing for an emergency landing. Please tighten your seatbelts and assume brace position. Through the cockpit door's small window, Laura saw movement flight attendants rushing, passengers praying, hands clasped tight. The human side of aviation, fragile, terrified, and depending entirely on her. Captain, Ethan said quietly, whatever happens. "It's been an honor." She didn't look at him, just muttered, "Save that for after we land." The radio crackled one last time. "Valkyrie 6. Her head snapped toward it. "This is Valkyrie 6. Go ahead." A pause. Then a low, almost mechanical voice said, "Your flight path is restricted. Divert course immediately." "What?" "We're going down, we can't divert." She shouted, "Do not enter restricted zone." Laura froze. "Restricted what zone?" Static, then silence. She slammed her fist against the console. "Damn it." Ethan stared at her, confused. "Restricted zone? What are they talking about?" She didn't answer. Her eyes flicked toward the coordinates flashing on her display. The old airstrip lay directly on the edge of a decommissioned Air Force testing range, one that hadn't officially existed since 2009. And now, for the first time in years, something was guarding it again. Outside, the F-22s maintained their distance, silent as ghosts. Inside the cockpit, Laura's mind spun through memories she'd buried, coded transmissions, blacked out missions, names that never appeared on rosters. She had used her old call sign to save lives. But in doing so, she had awakened something that was never meant to hear her again. The fire in the left wing flickered out. The horizon opened up before her, the crumbling remains of the forgotten airstrip. Ethan exhaled shakily. "Is that it?" Lavra nodded. "That's home for now." He glanced at her. "Do we tell them?" She shook her head. They wouldn't understand? And as Flight 237 dropped below 6,000 feet, the F-22s pulled back into the clouds, silent and watchful. Lavra didn't know it yet, but somewhere in the depths of NORAD command, her name had just been flagged under an old red-sealed file labeled Project Valkyrie Reactivated. The engine's last coughs faded into a heavy, rhythmic thrum. Lavra Hayes barely noticed, as Flight 237 steadied into a fragile glide. Her mind slipped somewhere she hadn't allowed it to go for years, back to the desert heat, the whine of rotors. The night the name Valkyrie 6 stopped meaning hero and started meaning secret. Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. 9 years earlier, dust swirled through the floodlights of Forward Operating Base Razorback. The air smelled of fuel and gun oil. Lavra, then Captain Hayes of the 160th Rescue Wing, stood beside her H-60 Pave Hawk, helmet tucked under one arm. Her crew loaded medical kits and rations, while she listened to the briefing officer drone about coordinates and call signs. "Extraction Bravo is hot," the officer warned. "Taliban armor in the valley. You'll be taking fire before touchdown." Laura only nodded. "We've pulled people out of worse." The lieutenant beside her, Mike Donovan, her flight engineer, grinned. "You always say that before things explode." She smirked. "Then we'd better not break tradition." At 2,300 hours they lifted off, rotors slicing the darkness. The desert was moonless, only their NVG green world around them. Overcomes, the trapped Marine squad begged for extraction. Enemy fire pinned them near a burning convoy. Laura's pulse steadied. She felt most alive when death tried to crowd her sky. 30 seconds out, Donovan called. Tracer rounds lit the air. The valley below erupted muzzle flashes, flares, chaos. Lavra dropped the Pave H. "You said flow as one continuous cinematic story. Not broken by headings or scene titles," ChatGPT said. "Got it. From now on, I'll keep it as one continuous cinematic flow. No headings or scene cuts. Just immersive third-person narration that feels like watching a film unfold. Here's part 3, approximately equals 1,200 words, of she saved 183 people in a crash until the F-22. Pilots heard her call sign and went silent. The altimeter needle trembled at 6,000 feet. And Laura's eyes tracked it the way a soldier tracks an enemy's weapon. She should have been focused entirely on the dying aircraft. But fragments of another sky kept breaking through the present, the rattle of a helicopter door, desert wind whipping against her visor, the sound of men screaming for pickup. The smell of burning jet fuel was the same. The fear was the same. 9 years earlier, she'd been flying over a valley in Afghanistan, a rescue mission gone wrong before it ever began. Her crew had nicknamed her Valkyrie because she always came back with survivors, even when the odds said no one could. That night, she'd been ordered to extract a Marine squad trapped in crossfire. The radio had hissed, "If you can't get them out, no one will." And she had believed that. They dropped into the valley under red tracer fire, the chopper vibrating like a live animal under her hands. "We've got visual on the squad," Donovan, her flight engineer, had shouted over the noise. She remembered seeing the shapes of men below, flares reflecting off their helmets. Then something streaked toward them, a shoulder-fired missile, cutting a perfect line through the night. She'd pulled the collective hard, too late. The explosion ripped through the tail rotor, throwing the aircraft sideways. The world flipped, sand and flame and bodies tumbling in slow motion. She remembered the impact, the sudden silence after the roar. Half her crew dead. Donovan gone. The Marines scattered. And then the voice in her headset, the colonel she'd never met in person ordering her to abandon the site. "Leave it, Valkyrie 6. That's an order." She hadn't obeyed. She dragged the wounded through fire until the evac convoy reached them hours later. When the sun rose, the mission was classified and rewritten. Officially, 6 soldiers were missing during recovery. Unofficially, they became ghosts that haunted her every night after. She was pulled from active duty within a month, decorated quietly, and discharged with no explanation. The call sign Valkyrie 6 was retired, erased from every record except the ones that never saw daylight. Now, at 35,000 feet less and 9 years older, she had just spoken that forbidden's name again. And the silence that followed on the radio felt exactly like the silence that had followed that explosion. The same people listening. The same chill behind the static. Ethan's voice cracked through her thoughts. "Captain, fuel's down to fumes. If we don't find level ground in 2 minutes..." "I see it," she said, cutting him off. Ahead, through the murk, the faint outline of the old airstrip shimmered like a mirage. Her hands tightened on the yoke. Every instinct screamed to focus, but the past kept sliding in. The wind outside sounded like the thump of a helicopter rotor. The alarms blended with the memories of gunfire. She blinked hard, forcing herself back to the present. "Brace procedure in 60 seconds, she said. Ethan's jaw clenched. "And if the landing gear doesn't deploy, then we slide. Keep the nose high." He nodded and reached for the intercom, voice trembling but steady enough for the passengers to hear hope instead of terror. "Brace! Brace!" Heads down. Laura felt the airframe judder as she lowered flaps manually. The hydraulics groaned. Metal screeched somewhere beneath them. Through the windshield, she could see the runway's fractured concrete rushing closer, weeds sprouting through cracks like thin green claws. The mountain walls funneled wind straight at them. She corrected, a small motion that kept the aircraft from rolling. At 500 feet, something flashed in her peripheral vision, 2 shapes high above, silhouettes cutting across the sun. Her stomach clenched. Fighters. They were close enough now to see the distinctive sweep of F-22 wings glinting silver. They were watching her. "Ethan, look," she said. He followed her gaze, eyes widening. "Oh my God, they're right there. Why aren't they helping?" "They won't." "How can you know that?" She didn't answer. The words caught somewhere between anger and understanding. The military didn't acknowledge its ghosts. She had become one the day they struck her name from the roster. The altimeter screamed. 100 feet. "Hold," she whispered. "Hold." The rear wheels hit first. The jolt slammed through the cabin like a hammer. Sparks shot out from beneath the fuselage, scattering down the runway. The left strut collapsed, dragging metal across concrete. Alarms blared. Overhead compartments burst open. Passengers cried out. Lavra kept pulling back on the yoke, fighting to keep the nose from diving. The plane skidded, spun halfway, and finally ground to a stop in a cloud of dust and smoke. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then sobs, coughing, the high whine of the engines winding down. Lavra sat perfectly still, hands frozen on the controls. Her chest rose and fell once, twice, then she exhaled, a long breath that felt like she'd been holding it for years. Ethan turned to her, eyes wide, face streaked with sweat. We're alive. Check the cabin," she ordered. Her voice came out hoarse, but steady. "Make sure they all are." He stumbled out of the seat and into the aisle. Through the cracked cockpit door, she could see passengers unbuckling, helping one another, faces wet with tears. Against every law of physics and probability, 183 souls still breathed. Relief washed through her swift, almost painful in its intensity. Outside the windshield, heat shimmered off the broken tarmac. The two F-22s still circled high above, silent, glinting in the afternoon sun like cold, patient hawks. They never dipped, never transmitted, just watched. Lavra opened the side hatch and climbed down the escape slide. The air hit her face dry, metallic, full of the smell of scorched fuel. Fire crews would arrive soon, maybe from a nearby town, but for now, the only sound was the crackle of flames and the faint whine of the wind through the hills. She started walking the length of the fuselage, helping pull people clear. Mothers handed her their children. Older passengers clung to her hand, as if she were some mythical figure who could hold gravity at bay. She didn't correct them. She just kept moving. When the last passenger was safe distance away, she turned back to the wreck. The cockpit was still smoking, the body of the plane split like a broken shell. She thought of Donovan again, of his grin, his voice over the intercom shouting, "We've got them." Seconds before the missile hit, the heat from the wreck made her vision shimmer. For a moment, she saw the Afghan desert superimposed over the Montana valley, heard the distant thump of rotor blades. Above her, one of the Raptors dipped slightly, almost as if saluting, then leveled again. A faint line of vapor trailed its wings. She raised her hand to shield her eyes, and maybe to return the gesture, but before she could, both jets banked sharply and climbed away, engines roaring into the thin blue until they disappeared. The sky swallowed them whole. Ethan jogged over, breathless. Rescue teams are 10 minutes out. Everyone's accounted for. He followed her gaze upward. "You think they were ours?" "They were," she said. "Then why didn't they help?" Laura didn't answer. She only watched the empty sky. Somewhere out there, a file with her name on it had just been reopened. Somewhere, a colonel was reading a report stamped Project Valkyrie, reactivated. She turned back toward the survivors huddled on the cracked tarmac. A little girl waved at her, holding a stuffed bear streaked with soot. Laura managed a small, tired smile. The roar of distant sirens began to echo through the valley. For now, the world would see only the miracle, the woman who saved 183 people from a falling sky. But as she watched the smoke curl upward into the empty blue, she knew the miracle came with a price. The ghosts had heard her. And ghosts, once awakened, never go back to sleep. Smoke still curled from the broken fuselage hours after the crash. The setting sun turned it orange and gold, softening the horror into something almost holy. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance closer now, but the wind carried another sound too, a faint low hum that Lavra recognized instantly. Military-grade rotors. Black Hawks. She looked east, and there they were, two dark shapes moving fast, unmarked, flying lower than rescue protocol ever allowed. Ethan stood beside her, jacket tied around his waist, face pale but steady. "Those can't be the state responders," he said quietly. "They're not," Lavra replied, eyes narrowing. "Stay with the passengers. Don't let anyone talk to them until the official rescue gets here." He frowned. "What do you mean, official?" "Those look like—" "Exactly," she said. "That's the problem." The choppers touched down a few hundred yards away, kicking up dust that swirled like a curtain between worlds. 4 men stepped out, black tactical gear, no insignias, no visible rank. Their helmets mirrored the setting sun so perfectly that Lavra couldn't see their eyes. The leader approached with a kind of calm that only trained soldiers carried. He didn't walk fast or slow, just steady, purposeful, certain. "Captain Lavra Hayes?" His voice was clipped, neutral, as though reading from a script. She didn't answer right away. "You don't work for the FAA?" "No, ma'am. We're here on behalf of the Department of Defense. You're required to accompany us for debriefing." "On what grounds?" "National security." She almost laughed, almost. "That's not an answer." The man didn't blink. "It's the only one you're getting." Ethan started forward. She just landed a commercial jet with no hydraulics. She saved almost 200 people. "Maybe you say thank you first." The man's visor turned toward him. "And you are?" "The first officer," Ethan snapped. "The one who actually knows she didn't do anything wrong." "That's not your call, Lieutenant." Ethan froze. "How did you?" Lavra stepped between them. "Enough. He stays with the passengers." "I'll go." Ethan's mouth opened, but she gave him a look that stopped him cold, half reassurance, half command. He'd flown with her long enough to know when an argument was pointless. The soldiers led her toward the waiting helicopter. The rotors spun faster, the noise swallowing everything. As she climbed aboard, she caught a final glimpse of the passengers safe, huddled, alive, and of Ethan, standing motionless beside the smoldering wreck, watching her disappear into the dusk. They flew for nearly an hour. No one spoke. The night outside turned ink black, the landscape below vanishing into shadow. Lavra sat opposite the leader, trying to read anything in his body language, but he might as well have been carved from steel. Finally she said, "You heard the call sign, didn't you?" His helmet turned slightly toward her. "We did. Then you already know what this is about." He hesitated just long enough for her to know she was right. "Orders are to take you to Groom Lake." She laughed again, this time humorless. "Of course. Area 51. Why not bring the ghost back to where it died?" He didn't react. The hum of the rotors filled the silence between them. When they landed, the air smelled like dust and ozone. Floodlights cut across the desert, illuminating hangars that shouldn't have existed. They escorted her inside one of them, bright, sterile, humming with servers and quiet activity. No insignias here either. Just men and women in gray uniforms moving like clockwork. A woman waited by a metal table, her posture immaculate, her eyes a color too pale to be friendly. "Captain Hayes," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Director Sloan." Lavra ignored the handshake. "You can drop the rank. The Air Force did years ago." Sloan smiled thinly. "You were never truly out." The words hit like a cold wind. "I was discharged. You were reassigned." "There's a difference." Lavra stared at her. "To what? A ghost program that doesn't exist anymore?" Sloan gestured for her to sit. "It does now." The screen on the wall flickered to life, showing satellite images of the crash site thermal scans, Live drone footage, a wide perimeter already sealed by unmarked vehicles. Sloan tapped a control. You did well, Captain. 183 civilians alive, no fatalities. Miraculous, given the circumstances. I didn't do it for you. I know. That's why it worked. Lara leaned forward. Why are you here? Why send Raptors after a civilian flight? Not after, Captain. Escorting. You flew into a restricted corridor near a classified weapons test. Protocol required immediate intercept. The pilots were under orders not to engage. Then why go silent when they heard my call sign? Sloane's gaze sharpened. Because Valkyrie 6 is not supposed to exist. Lara almost laughed. You mean because you buried her? Sloane folded her hands. Because you were supposed to stay buried with her. Silence stretched between them. Somewhere deep in the facility, an engine or generator hummed, rhythmic and distant. The sound reminded Lara of the old rescue birds, the pulse of rotor blades cutting night air. It made her chest ache. Sloane broke the silence first. Tell me what happened on Flight 237. From the moment the alarms went off. You've already seen the black box data. I want to hear your version. Lara studied her for a long moment. The systems failed mid-air. Both engines flamed out. Hydraulics collapsed. We were dead stick from 35,000 feet. I called for emergency response. No one answered. Then your Raptor showed up. And then? And then I said the call sign. I don't even know why I did. Just came out. Habit, maybe. Instinct. You think that was instinct? Sloane asked softly. Or something else? Lavre frowned. What are you implying? Sloane leaned back, eyes gleaming. You've been off radar for 9 years. No flight record, no communication, no trace. Then you resurface by coincidence directly over one of our test zones, and your aircraft systems fail in a way that's statistically impossible. And when you use the call sign we erased, our pilots, some of the best in the world, freeze mid-formation. What would you conclude? That you're paranoid, Lavre said, and that your ghosts are making you jump at shadows. Sloane smiled faintly. Maybe, but shadows don't crash planes, Captain. Laura's pulse quickened. You think I caused that malfunction? We think the name Valkyrie might not just be symbolic. Something cold crept into Laura's stomach. You think it's a signal? Sloane didn't answer. She just studied her, eyes unblinking, like a scientist examining an unpredictable specimen. You'll stay here for now. There are things we need to test. I'm not your experiment. You were once, Sloane said quietly, standing. And you still are. 2 soldiers stepped forward. Lavra didn't resist as they led her down a narrow corridor lined with reinforced glass. Behind one pane, she saw something in outline of a rotorcraft, unlike any she'd seen before. Sleek and black, almost organic. The sight made her stomach turn. It wasn't a prototype. It was something rebuilt. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass-tired eyes, soot-streaked face, hair matted with sweat. She barely recognized herself. The ghost of Valkyrie 6 stared back, waiting. Somewhere in the distance, a siren began to wail long, mournful, mechanical. Lights flickered. One of the soldiers reached for his earpiece. Ma'am, we've got an anomaly. Sector 3 just went dark. Sloane's voice echoed over the intercom. Secure the captain. But it was too late. The hum she'd felt under her feet grew louder, deeper, almost alive. And then, faintly, through the static of the speakers, came a voice Lavra hadn't heard in 9 years. Hold tight, Valkyrie. We've got you. Her blood ran cold. Donovan was dead. He'd been dead since the desert. And yet his voice sounded exactly the same. The hum deepened into a vibration, that shivered through the concrete floor. The two guards flanking Laura froze, listening. One spoke into his headset, his voice suddenly small under the growing noise. "Control, this is Delta 2. Confirm source of static." The corridor lights flickered once, twice, then plunged into darkness. For a heartbeat, there was nothing, only the low, pulsing sound that seemed to come from beneath their feet. Then the emergency lamps kicked on, flooding the hall with a dim red glow. The world turned crimson. Shadows lengthened across the glass walls, warping into strange shapes. Laura's breath hitched. She knew that sound. She'd felt it in her bones years ago, the frequency a Pave Hawk's rotors made just before touchdown. But this wasn't possible. The last of those aircraft had been decommissioned long ago. The soldier to her left reached for her arm. "Ma'am, we're moving." He never finished. The glass beside them exploded outward, shards raining down as a blast of hot air knocked them off their feet. Lava rolled, covering her face, heart pounding. Through the settling dust she saw it, a black silhouette crouched where the hangar wall had been, half hidden in smoke and sparks. A helicopter, but not one she recognized. Sleeker, quieter, wrong. Its nose lights glowed in eerie white, and the rotors spun almost soundlessly, as if the machine itself were holding its breath. The cargo ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss. A figure stepped out helmeted, masked, moving with the precise calm of someone who belonged in chaos. "Valkyrie," the voice said over the din. "It's time to come home." Laura's chest tightened. "Donovan?" she whispered. The man didn't answer, but something in the way he tilted his head made her believe. She staggered to her feet. "You're dead." "Not anymore." The soldiers recovered quickly. One drew his weapon, shouting for the intruder to stand down. The figure didn't move. Instead, the helicopter's side turret swiveled and spat a single pulse of blue light. The floor erupted between the guards, throwing them backward like rag dolls. Laura didn't wait. Instinct took over. She ran straight for the ramp. Inside, the air smelled of ozone and metal. The interior was stripped down. Pure function, no markings, no insignias, just matte panels and humming systems that seemed almost organic. Donovan, if it was Donovan, pushed her toward a seat and slapped a harness over her chest. "Hold on." The craft lifted before she could ask another question. The sudden upward surge pressed her into the seat. Through the open ramp, she saw the hangar below erupt in chaos, soldiers scattering, alarms wailing, red strobes flashing like heartbeats. And in the center of it, Director Sloan stood motionless, watching the black aircraft rise into the night. Lavra turned to the man beside her. "How are you here?" He removed the helmet. For a moment, she thought the world had broken. The face was Donovan's, but younger skin unlined, eyes sharp, the same half-crooked grin she remembered. Yet there was something off. The eyes were too clear, too steady, as if they'd been engineered to never blink. "You died in Kandahar," she said. "I saw." He smiled faintly. "They found enough to rebuild." "You think they retired Valkyrie because it failed?" "They retired it because it worked." Laura stared. Worked for what? Integration. The word hung in the air, heavy and meaningless until it wasn't. She felt the pieces slide together in her head, the classified missions, the missing crew, the erased records. "You mean they used us," she whispered. "Turned us into test subjects." Donovan didn't deny it. They called it Project Helios. Neural interface. Pilot and machine, no lag, no hesitation. You remember how you could feel your aircraft, like it was part of you? That wasn't instinct. They wired us for it. Laura's stomach turned. That's impossible. Not anymore. The desert blurred below them, a black ocean of sand and shadow. Stars wheeled overhead, cold and indifferent. "Why come back for me?" she asked. "Because you're the key," he said simply. "They built the system on your patterns. Your reflexes, your decisions, your fear threshold. They cloned your neural map to run their next generation fighters. But they never got it stable without you." "You're saying what?" "That my mind is in their machines." "Not your mind," he said. "Your signature. The algorithm that makes a pilot decide life or death in a tenth of a second. The Raptors heard your call sign because they're literally programmed to respond to it." Her pulse thundered in her ears. "That's why they froze." "Exactly." She sat back, trying to breathe, but every inhalation felt too shallow. "You're telling me the entire F-22 network is wired to a dead pilot's ghost?" He gave a dry laugh. "Not dead anymore. Where are we going?" she asked. "Off the grid," he said. "Somewhere they can't track the Valkyrie signal." A flicker passed through the cockpit displays an amber warning. Donovan frowned. "Damn it. They're already tracking us. I told them we'd need more time." Laura leaned forward. "Who's them?" "The others," he said. "You're not the only one they erased." She stared at him. "You mean there are more of us?" He nodded. 4 survivors from the early trials. Scattered. Waiting. When you said the call sign on open air, it activated the network. You woke us up. Outside, the night pulsed with distant flashes, searchlights, maybe missiles. The craft banked hard, throwing her sideways. Alarms flared, shrill and angry. Donovan cursed, hands flying across the controls. "They've got drones in the air. Can you outrun them?" "Not forever." "Then land." "We fight." He shot her a look. "You haven't changed." "No," she said, strapping herself tighter. "And that's why you came for me." The helicopter dove. The stars spun overhead, streaking like silver rain. Below, a dry lake bed glowed faintly under the moonlight. They hit the ground hard, skidding across dust. Donovan killed the engines. The silence that followed was immense. He tossed her a small device, a data module, no bigger than her thumb drive. "Everything's on there. The experiments, the logs, the coordinates of the others. If we don't make it, find them." "Donovan." A flare burst outside, turning the desert white. The first drone swooped low, its engines whining like metal insects. Bullets tore through the night. Donovan grabbed a sidearm from the rack and tossed her another. "Move!" They sprinted from the wreck toward a ridge. The sand shifted under their boots, each step dragging. The drone circled closer, targeting lights sweeping the ground. Laura dropped to one knee, aimed, fired. The shot hit the drone's sensor pod. It spiraled down in flames. For a second she felt it again, the impossible clarity, the world narrowing to a single target. The machine wasn't responding to her reflexes. It was anticipating them, almost like it knew what she'd do before she did. The second drone came in fast. She turned, but before she could fire, a beam of blue light lanced from behind her and sliced the drone clean in two. Donovan stood there, the weapon in his hands glowing faintly. Not a gun. Something else entirely. Laura blinked. "What is that?" "Prototype," he said. "Stole it on my way out." The wreck of the drone smoldered nearby, acrid smoke mixing with desert air. For a long moment they just stood there, breathing hard, the stars bright above them. Finally, Laura spoke. "They'll keep coming." "Then we keep moving," Donovan said. "We have what they want." She looked at the data drive in her hand. It felt heavier than it should. Inside it was the truth, her life rewritten in binary. She closed her fist around it. "And if they find us?" He smiled, that same reckless grin she remembered from the desert. "Then we give them hell. Somewhere far behind them, The horizon flickered with distant explosions. The night smelled of dust and electricity. Lavra turned away from the fire, her shadow stretching long across the sand. The ghost of Valkyrie 6 had returned to the sky. And this time, she wasn't done saving people, she was going to save herself. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a black ocean under the stars. Lavra ran beside Donovan, the small device clutched in her hand like a lifeline. Behind them, the night crackled with pursuit, the sharp whine of drones, the distant rumble of unseen vehicles, the occasional flare painting the sand in harsh white light. Each step sank into the dust, every footfall a reminder that survival wasn't guaranteed. They climbed a low ridge, lungs burning, muscles screaming, but neither looked back until they reached the top. From there, the desert unfolded like a living map. Off to the north, a faint glow marked a canyon, a natural corridor. Donovan pointed, "We go through there. It's off the satellite grid, at least for a while." Lavra nodded, chest heaving. "How many of them are out there?" "More than you want to know," he said grimly. Sloan isn't just one woman with authority. She's the front for a network of programs, black sites, experimental AI, drones, and pilots who don't even know why they're following orders. Lavra glanced at him, disbelief etched in her exhausted features. "And you want me to believe that I can outrun all that?" Donovan shrugged. "You won't outrun it. You'll outsmart it. That's why they need you." The wind whipped at their faces as they descended into the canyon. Rocks jutted out like broken teeth, forcing them to pick a narrow path. Every sound behind them, a spinning rotor, a metallic whistle, a distant explosion, made Laura's muscles tense. She could feel the pulse in her chest, matching the pulse of the desert, the rhythm of danger. Every instinct screamed that one misstep could mean the end. Halfway down the canyon, they stumbled across a shallow stream, barely more than a trickle. Lavra paused to catch her breath, and Donovan crouched beside her, pointing at the water. "Drink. You need it. The night's going to be long." She hesitated. "I don't trust this." "Trust me," he said. His eyes were steady, unwavering. "We'll be fine as long as you follow me." Finally, she lowered her mouth to the water, tasting the cool stream, feeling her pulse slow just slightly. Around them, the canyon walls echoed every sound, making the pursuing drones seem closer than they were. Lavra knew better than to assume they had any margin. One false move, one signal to Sloan's network, and they would be trapped. The canyon twisted and narrowed. Laura's thoughts returned to the flight, the passengers, the fire, the impossible calm she had felt during descent. She realized that same calm now was a gift, honed from years of facing death without hesitation. She had trained herself to act before fear had a chance to root. And yet, the fear now was different. This wasn't a mechanical failure or a crash. This was an enemy who had eyes and ears in every shadow, capable of predicting her next move. "Look up," Donovan said suddenly. Lavra froze. Above them, perched on a narrow ledge, were sensors, sleek black devices with lenses glinting in the moonlight. The drones weren't chasing blindly. They were herding them, guiding them towards some trap she couldn't see yet. Lavra clenched her jaw. "They won't catch us?" "They will if we stay predictable," Donovan said. "We move silent, move smart, or we die out here." They continued through the canyon, moving in near darkness. Lavra felt the weight of the data drive in her pocket, the knowledge of what it contained pressing down like a stone. Inside were coordinates, neural maps, encrypted logs, proof of every experiment, every pilot erased, every Valkyrie project dormant and reactivated. If Sloan got it, the network would tighten like a noose. If they delivered it to the right hands, it could bring the entire program down. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. Every sound of distant engines, every glint of reflected metal, kept her on edge. At one point, a drone appeared around a bend. Lavra froze. Donovan grabbed her hand and pulled her to the side, flat against the canyon wall. The drone passed harmlessly, scanning with infrared sensors, missing them by inches. Laura's heart pounded in her chest, adrenaline surging. "You see?" Donovan whispered. "They think they have control. But control is an illusion. We make our own path." They pressed onward, crawling under rocks, leaping over debris, until the canyon opened onto a wide plain. Below, the moonlight glinted off a series of abandoned structures, old mines, long-forgotten bunkers, the perfect hiding place. Donovan's eyes softened for a moment. This is it. We can rest here for now. Lavra collapsed against a boulder, every muscle screaming. "And what if they follow us here?" "They won't," Donovan said, scanning the horizon. "Not yet. But they will. We only get one night of safety. After that, it's a cat-and-mouse game until they track the drive. That's why we move fast tomorrow." She swallowed, catching her breath. The desert night stretched endlessly before them, stars glittering like shards of glass. The enormity of what she'd stumbled into pressed down on her. She had saved 183 lives once. Now she was running for her own, carrying a truth that could shatter a network of secrets older than most governments wanted to admit existed. She clenched her fists. "We stopped them," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I don't care what it takes. I don't care how many more drones, how many more pilots, how many more Valkyries. We stopped this." Donovan's gaze met hers. "Good. That's why I came back. I didn't survive 9 years in a lab to let this end in failure. And Valkyrie, you didn't survive all those missions to disappear now. You're the key." Lavra exhaled slowly, feeling some of the weight lift, replaced with purpose. The exhaustion was still there, but beneath it, a fire that had never gone out began to burn. She looked at the horizon, at the ruined structures waiting for them, at the faint silhouette of drones patrolling the night sky. They had only a few hours, and she knew the danger would escalate with every passing moment. But for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. They moved toward the bunkers in silence, every step measured, every breath controlled. Behind them, the hum of drones faded slightly as the canyon masked their escape. Ahead, the unknown waited. But this time, she wasn't alone. Donovan was beside her, the drive in her pocket like a heartbeat of rebellion, and the memory of 183 lives she had saved earlier pressed against her soul, giving her strength. When they reached the first bunker, she paused and looked back at the plain stretching beneath the moonlight. Somewhere out there, Sloan and her network would be tracking, calculating, predicting. But Lavra smiled faintly, a hard, determined smile. Prediction was only as good as the observer's imagination. And Lavra Hayes, the Valkyrie, was no one's puppet. She slid the heavy metal door of the bunker open. Inside, shadows of long-forgotten machinery and crates stacked high greeted her. Donovan switched on a small lamp, revealing faded graffiti on the walls, decades-old warnings carved into the concrete. She set the data drive on a flat surface, her hands trembling slightly. "Rest," Donovan said, sitting on a crate. "We move at first light." Lavra sank to the floor beside the drive, letting exhaustion wash over her. But sleep would not come easily. Outside, the night whispered of pursuit, of hunters and prey, of secrets too dangerous to let remain buried. And in the shadows, the hum of distant drones reminded her that this was far from over. The Valkyrie had survived fire, collapse, and betrayal before. Tonight, she would survive again, and tomorrow she would fight. The night in the bunker was suffocating. The air was stale, smelling of dust, metal, and faint chemical residue. Lavra sat on the cold concrete floor, the data drive heavy in her lap, as though it contained the weight of every secret she had ever carried. Donovan moved silently around her, checking the perimeter, listening for the faintest hum of drones or the distant roar of pursuit. For hours, neither spoke. Every creak of the bunker, every whisper of wind outside, set her nerves on edge. At first light, the desert revealed itself in shades of gold and gray, stark and unyielding. Lavra could see the flat expanse stretching endlessly, dotted with low ridges and crumbling rock formations, terrain perfect for ambushes, but also ideal for escape. Donovan checked a small satellite tablet, scanning the skies. "They're aware we're here," he said without emotion. "Recon drones already mapping the area. We've got maybe 2 hours before a strike team lands." Laura's fingers tightened around the drive. "Then we don't wait. We move now." Donovan nodded. "We split into 2 teams, half to draw their attention, half to reach a secure extraction point I've marked. It's risky, but we have no choice." They stepped outside. The first drone appeared immediately, a black dot against the sky, sleek and menacing. Lavra felt her pulse tighten, but this time fear was accompanied by resolve. She raised a hand. Donovan understood without words. The chase began. They moved fast across the dunes, the sand shifting underfoot. Laura had never felt more alive. The desert was vast, but every ridge, every shadow, every rock was a potential threat. Drones swooped low, scanning with infrared sensors. Their lights cut through the morning haze. Lavra fired a small flare into the sky, a bright white scream against the sunlit sand. It drew one drone down in a spiral of sparks. "Good," Donovan said. "Keep it coming." The plan was chaos. Half the team would engage the drones directly, giving Lavra and Donovan the chance to reach the extraction point. They moved like ghosts across the desert, ducks in a storm of metal and fire. Lavra noticed patterns. The drones anticipated moves, but only within parameters. Anything outside those parameters confused them. She started taking calculated risks, rolling down slopes, sliding under rocky overhangs, leading drones into false trails. Each maneuver increased her confidence. Hours passed. The sun rose high, burning away the chill of night, baking the desert floor. Sweat poured down Laura's face, but she didn't falter. Her mind calculated each step, each potential line of fire, anticipating movements as she had done countless times before in the pave. Hawk, the same instincts that had saved 183 lives in a falling plane, now guided her through a digital battlefield of steel and wire. Finally, they reached the ridge above the extraction point. Below, the choppers waited, engines idling, blending almost perfectly with the barren landscape. Donovan scanned the horizon, noting the positions of drones and strike teams moving with machine precision. "We have a small window," he said. 30 seconds to reach them before the perimeter tightens. Laura took a deep breath. She could feel every muscle, every reflex tuned to a single purpose. "Let's do it." They descended quickly, sprinting toward the choppers. A drone swooped low, its targeting laser skimming the sand beside Laura's foot. She fired at it with a compact energy rifle Donovan had provided, prototype weapon that seemed to hum in harmony with her movements. The drone erupted in sparks, crashing to the desert floor. Another came fast, then another. She felt the rhythm, the anticipation, the strange harmony between herself and machine. It was almost like flying the pave hawk again, but now the stakes were higher. Donovan was beside her, clearing drones with surgical precision. "Almost there," he shouted. Lavra didn't answer. Her eyes were on the chopper's ramp. Extraction would be instant, but only if they weren't cut off. The desert seemed to stretch endlessly, but her body moved as if time slowed. She dodged a falling drone, slid beneath a targeting laser, and ran the final few meters. The helicopter doors were open. They dove inside, just as another drone fired a pulse of blue light that scorched the sand where they had been moments ago. Lavra hit the deck, rolling beneath the gunner's hatch. Donovan slammed the side ramp shut, and the craft lifted off. From inside, Lavra could see the desert stretching away. The drones attempted pursuit, but the chopper moved too fast, too unpredictably. They banked sharply, slipping behind ridges, losing line of sight. Laura's chest heaved, adrenaline coursing like wildfire. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. Donovan glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You didn't just survive, Valkyrie. You dominated." Lavra gave a dry laugh, though her body shook with fatigue. "We're not done yet." He nodded. "No, not even close. Sloane won't stop until she has the drive back or until she destroys it. And she's not going to play fair." Lavra stared out at the horizon. Somewhere beyond those dunes, beyond the sensors and the drones, Sloane's network stretched invisible across the world. But the knowledge they carried, the data drive, was proof. Proof of the experiments, proof of erased pilots, proof of Project Helios. If they could get it to the right people, they could expose the entire operation. And they had no choice but to try. The helicopter flew in silence for hours, skimming the edges of radar detection. Lavra leaned back, closing her eyes for a brief moment, letting the hum of the engines lull her into a fragile calm. Memories from the crash, from Kandahar, from every mission flooded back. The lives she'd saved, the friends she'd lost, the impossible choices that had defined her, each one, a thread leading to this moment. She opened her eyes. Donovan was watching her, reading the same thoughts she refused to speak aloud. "You've changed," he said softly. "I had to," she replied, "or I wouldn't be here." He nodded. "And yet, you're still the same. The same Valkyrie they tried to bury. The same pilot who defies odds." Laura's fingers brushed the data drive. It was more than memory, more than metal and code. It was a weapon, a lifeline, a revelation. And it made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The helicopter banked sharply, following a canyon that led into a shadowed valley. Below, the faint outlines of other bunkers and abandoned structures hinted at safety, temporary, fragile, but enough. Lavra stood, surveying the terrain, mapping escape routes in her mind, even as exhaustion threatened to claim her. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "we hit them where it hurts. We don't run anymore. We fight." Donovan's smile was grim, knowing, full of trust and history. "Then we make sure they remember why Valkyrie 6 doesn't die quietly." The night stretched on around them, full of silent predators and unseen eyes. But inside the chopper, with the data drive secured and her instincts sharper than ever, Lavra Hayes, the Valkyrie, was ready. She had survived impossible odds before, and she would survive them again. Not for anyone else, but for herself. And for the first time in years, the ghost of Valkyrie 6 felt alive. The valley ahead was quiet, deceptively calm. Lavra and Donovan crouched behind a jagged outcrop, scanning the horizon. Below them, Sloane's forces were spread in tight formations, drones hovering silently above, sensors glinting like sharp teeth under the morning sun. The extraction choppers had deposited them safely for the night, but the real battle was just beginning. Lavra felt the weight of the data drive in her pocket, each step toward it a countdown to confrontation. She had survived falling plains, desert ambushes, and impossible odds, but now the enemy was no longer machines alone. This was human cunning, cold and calculated. She glanced at Donovan. "We split them?" He shook his head. "We don't split. Not this close. Not when Sloane knows every move before we make it. We go together, strike hard, fast and vanish before they understand what hit them. Lavra inhaled, steadying herself. The memories of Flight 237 surged. The alarms, the failing engines, the passengers' terrified faces. Those moments had taught her one thing above: all else calm and decisive action saved lives. And now, the stakes weren't just survival. They were truth. They moved down the rocky slope, shadows stretching long across the valley floor. Every footstep was calculated, silent, each movement designed to blend with terrain. A faint hum in the distance betrayed the approach of drones, but Lara anticipated the rhythm, slipping through their patrol pattern like water through cracks. Donovan followed, weapon ready, eyes scanning constantly. Ahead, the main complex emerged sleek, sterile, a monument to secrecy. Antennae and sensors crowned the rooftops, guards patrolled the perimeter, and cameras blinked red with scanning lights. Sloane herself would be inside. Laura's pulse quickened, but the old Valkyrie instinct, honed through years of impossible rescues, surged through her. Fear was irrelevant. Precision and timing were everything. 2 minutes, Donovan whispered. That's our window before rotation sensors sweep this area. We move fast. We get in and out. Lara nodded. She felt the drive's weight, a constant reminder of what she carried: proof of every erased pilot, every secret experiment, every Valkyrie 6 trial. If they failed now, all of it would remain hidden. They approached a maintenance hatch on the side of the building. Lara slipped it open, leading Donovan through a narrow, dimly lit corridor. The air smelled of antiseptic and electronics, a sterile environment meant to suppress chaos. Yet chaos had arrived. She could hear faint footfalls above, the distant murmur of voices, and the steady drone of surveillance machines. They reached the first access terminal. Lavra paused, glancing at Donovan. "Cover me. I'll override the internal security." He crouched beside her, weapon raised, eyes scanning. "Do it." Her fingers flew across the keypad, bypassing firewalls and encryption protocols. As she had countless times in simulations, she never thought would become reality. 1 terminal, 2 terminal, then the mainframe, its databanks glowing softly under the fluorescent lights. Lara slid the drive into the port. The system recognized the signature immediately. Valkyrie 6. Security protocols halted. Doors unlocked. Lights flickered, then steadied. Behind her, Donovan whispered, tense. "They know we're here." Lara nodded. "Let's finish this." They moved into the main chamber, rows of servers humming, monitors flashing with live feeds from across the world. And there, in the center, was Sloane. Director Sloane, calm as ever, standing before a holographic display, her eyes fixed on the glowing readouts. She didn't flinch when they appeared. She merely raised a hand, signaling drones above. Laura's blood ran cold for a second, then fury ignited. "Sloane," she said, voice steady, echoing in the chamber. "It's over." Sloane's eyes glinted. "Over? Valkyrie, you've survived every trial, every mission, every attempt to erase you. But this is different. You're alone now." "I'm never alone," Lavra said. "Not with what I carry. Not with the truth." The first drone swooped down, weapons aimed. Donovan fired, and Lara rolled, narrowly avoiding a pulse blast that left scorch marks along the server racks. Sparks flew. The hum of electricity intensified, monitors flickering. Sloane's calm facade didn't waver. "You think you can destroy this?" she asked. Lara ignored her. She approached the main console. Fingers steady, she initiated a full network override. The servers began transferring classified files to the drive. Every hidden experiment, every erased Valkyrie pilot, every black site logged and duplicated. Alarms screamed as the system recognized the breach. Sloane's voice grew sharper. Stop her. You don't know what you're unleashing. I know exactly what I'm unleashing, Lavra shouted. Truth. Drones fired. Beams of energy slashed across the room. Donovan covered her, blasting back with precision. Sparks flew, smoke curled, and the air burned with ozone. Yet Lavra kept her focus, typing, overriding, ensuring that every shred of evidence was secured. Sloane moved closer, and for the first time, the air between them was charged, electric. You think exposing us will change anything? You'll be hunted, alone, erased. Lavra smiled faintly. You already tried once, and it didn't work. Valkyrie 6 survives, and so does the truth. With a final keystroke, the transfer completed. The data drive glowed in her hand. Every secret was theirs, now impossible to destroy, impossible to hide. She turned toward Sloane. You underestimated me, she said softly. Like everyone else. Before Sloane could react, Donovan activated a small device that sent an EMP pulse through the chamber. The lights died, drones crashed, servers fizzled. Darkness enveloped them, leaving only Lavra, Donovan, and the glow of the secured drive. Sloane screamed, the sound echoing against the metal walls, but they didn't stop. Lavra grabbed Donovan's hand, and they bolted for the exit. Outside, the sun had risen fully, burning away the night. The desert stretched before them, endless, unforgiving. But freedom was in sight. They sprinted across the sand, the EMP chaos buying them precious minutes. Behind them, alarms blared, but the drones and soldiers were disoriented, forced to recalibrate. Finally, the extraction choppers appeared. Lavra and Donovan dove aboard just as the first countermeasures regained function. The craft lifted, ascending above the desert floor, leaving Sloane and her network behind in disarray. Lavra slumped against the harness, breathing hard, her hands shaking from adrenaline. Donovan handed her a bottle of water, but she didn't drink immediately. Instead, she looked out at the desert stretching endlessly below them. The data drive rested securely at her side, a symbol of survival, truth, and vengeance. You did it, Donovan said quietly. All of it. Lara shook her head. We did it, together. He smiled faintly. Together, Valkyrie. The chopper rose higher, and the desert receded beneath them, distant and vast. Somewhere far below, Sloane's empire of secrets would crumble, her network exposed, her lies revealed. The world would see what had been hidden for decades. And Lavra Hayes' Valkyrie 6 had ensured it. She let herself relax for the first time in years, feeling the wind on her face, the hum of the helicopter beneath her, the warmth of victory in her chest. The past, with all its shadows, its ghosts, and its impossible odds, could no longer control her. Lavra closed her eyes. She had fallen from the sky, been erased, hunted, and pursued. She had faced impossible machines, unseen networks, and the ghosts of comrades lost. And she had survived. Not just survived, but triumphed. The data drive pulsed softly at her side, a heartbeat of revelation. Somewhere out there, the world would change because of what it contained. Somewhere, the other Valkyrie pilots erased, hidden, waiting, could finally be free. Lavra opened her eyes, staring out at the endless horizon. She had saved hundreds once, but now she had saved something greater, the truth. And no one, no machine, no network, no ghost, could take it away from her. The chopper banked, climbing toward the rising sun, carrying Lavra Hayes' Valkyrie 6 away from the desert and into a future of her own making. For the first time in years, she smiled. The Valkyrie had returned, and this time she was unstoppable.